Welcome to week 14 of the free Tendies head coach episode. I'm here with Yanni. How's it going, man?
How you doing, buddy?
We are on the final push for playoffs. For most leagues, this is going to be the final week of the regular season. I have a 100% advance rate this year. Very proud about that. Yanni, what's your advance rate this year?
50%, 5 out of 10 leagues, and then I have 4 leagues that'll be decided this week, 1 league where I'm eliminated.
So your best case is 90% on 10 teams.
Best case
That's
is 90%
impressive.
on 10. Yeah,
That,
dude, I'd be happy about that. I doubt I'll get that, but if I get 7 of them, I'll be thrilled.
hell yeah. All right, let's get into the game breakdowns. All right, we're going to start with Green Bay going into Detroit to play the Lions on Thursday night. The Packers have an implied team total of 24 points. The Lions have an implied team total of 27.5 points. For the Packers, we're starting Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs, Tucker Kraft, and Jaden Reed, and we are going to STD Christian Watson and Dontavian Wicks. And then for the Lions, we're just rolling everybody out. So we'll start with the Lions first. Yeah, man, this is like the best offense in the league at this point. Ben Johnson is the best coordinator in terms of red zone efficiency. You want all of your Lions in there and starting. It's all at cost, right? Like Jamison Williams is not a wide receiver one, right? But he's like a flex option. Sam Laporta at this point, I'd say is like a mid to low end tight end one, but he's on the tight end one radar, right? Amon Ra, top five receiver. Jared Goff, low end one. That's just what they are at this point. Nothing has changed. They all have a place in your lineup. This Packers defense, we're not respecting it such that we think you would sit any of those guys more abnormally. If you have a roster with, I don't know, let's say Jackson Smith Najigba and I don't know, DJ Moore. I'd probably start those guys over Jamison Williams, but we still like Jamison this week. Then for the Packers, this is going to be pretty interesting, right? This Lions team, up until last week, they had only allowed, or they hadn't allowed a second half touchdown in 3 straight weeks. Caleb finally got it going against this Lions team, though. They're getting injured. They're like one of the most injured defenses in the league other than maybe the San Francisco 49ers. So even though like they were playing well, I think this is going to be a spot where the Packers are able to score. We know the deal with Jordan Love. He's going to make a couple of terrible decisions, but he gets the offense moving. And in a game that should be high scoring, he's fine here, right? Like a passing touchdown's worth 4 points and interception's only worth -2, right? You can live with a couple of picks. He's not your real team quarterback; it's a fantasy quarterback. Josh Jacobs, I believe. I don't know what the period is, but over I think it's like the past 5 or 6 weeks, something like that. He's been the RB2 in all of fantasy. The touchdown regression has been hitting hard. He is a very good player on a team that is committed to running the ball, and the next two guys like reasonable options behind him that might have split time with him and AJ Dillon and Marshawn Lloyd have been injured or out all year. We don't see that changing in this one. Fire him up as an RB1. He's going to get 20 carries, I think, this game. Tucker Kraft, it's been ho hum from him, right? Like he feels great as a waiver wire pickup. He's not your elite tight end, right? He's not a George Kittle. He's not a Brock Bowers. But I think low end one is probably what you can expect from him here. He may have like a spike week if he gets into the end zone, but I think I would be expecting anywhere from 8 to 15 from him in this game. Then Jaden Reed, baby Debo. Dude's a baller. He actually leads the NFL right now in wide receiver rushing yards. The opportunities weren't necessarily there for him last week, but I believe he got in the end zone twice. I think that in this game script with Romeo Dobbs out, some of those targets should be going his way more often. And if the Packers have to score to keep up with this Lions team, really like him in this spot, locked and loaded wide receiver one this week for me. Then we're going to tricky decision Christian Watson and Dontavian Wicks. Because Romeo Dobbs is out, I think that these guys have a stronger argument for making it into your lineup as a flex. It's really just the pieces that are in this Packers offense, like the outside pieces. Like, do you think it's a good Jordan Love passing game? And do you think this is the week they hit? I prefer Christian Watson more to Dontavian Wicks, but I think they both have arguments. I'd call Christian Watson like a stronger flex, maybe like a mid to strong flex, and I'd call Dontavian Wicks like a bye week hell replacement, where you're just hoping for 7 to 10 points. Miss anything there, Yanni?
No, you did a great job, man. If you guys are playing the showdown, the captain slate, I think your safest captain's actually going to be Reed when you factor in price and ceiling. I don't have a lot of interest in Jacobs in the DFS slate this week, or the one game matchup slate. And then if you want to get a little weird, man, if you want to go cheaper, I think Watson, like, there's a chance, dude, with Dobbs out and the game script and it's indoors and they're going to have to pass the ball a lot. I like Watson a lot if you guys are going to go cheaper captain. I'd be curious to see how that goes. I'm probably going to make a Reed and a Watson captain roster this week. So good luck if you guys play it. Okay, Raiders at Buccaneers. Raiders with an implied team total of 20. Buccaneers with an implied team total of 26.5. Look at that nice 26.5, man. Getting up there with Mike Evans back, with Baker rolling, with Bucky rolling. Fun fact, Baker Mayfield is the only quarterback this year to beat Philadelphia and the Lions. So he has a good two of the best wins in the NFL for any single quarterback this year. For the Raiders, look, this is kind of out there, I guess, but the Buccaneers hemorrhage passing yards this year. They're a shell of themselves defensively and what they've been in previous years. I actually love the AOC streamer this week. If you're going to stream Aiden O'Connell, I think you're perfectly reasonable to do so, especially in daily fantasy with how cheap he's going to be for the relative. I would guess he'll be for like $5,500, $5,800, maybe $6,100, compared to those top end quarterbacks that are more in the $7,500 range. Dude, rip it. I think you can rip it. Absolutely. Game script, soft defense. I think he'll get his yardage out there. He played the best football he's ever played last week. Bowers, you're never thinking about whether or not you're starting Bowers. And Myers, you're never thinking about whether or not you're starting Jacoby Myers this year. He is a top 20 receiver. He's been a top 12 receiver since Devontae Adams left. He's top 20 overall this year in PPR points per game. Dude, we say it a lot on this channel. It's nothing that innovative. It's common in fantasy. What you pray for are these concentrated offenses. And oh my God, do the Raiders have a nice concentrated offense. Okay. So when we say train wreck of a running back room, here's what we mean. Zamir White and Alexander Mattison have not practiced yet as of this week, or maybe one of them got a limited practice in today. I didn't check the practice report. It's looking weird for both of them. I don't know what's going on. Zamir White was not fantasy relevant when he's in, so we're not really worried about him. Alexander Mattison, if he does not go, okay, in standard and in half PPR, I think you can actually play. I do not remember the kid's name. That is so rude. Who's the rookie that broke out last week?
Sincere McCormick.
Sincere McCormick. He actually looked excellent to me, dude. Like seriously, looked like a great. But if you need a streamer this week, I'm in a spot with some of my rosters where 4 running backs are on bye. Like seriously, I'm so if you need that and you need to pick them up off the wire and Madison and White are out, rip it. You're good. If Madison is in, okay, I probably would just rather play nobody, but Abdullah in full PPR maybe. Again, right? Different scenarios here. If it is just Sincere and Abdullah, I think in full PPR and an emergency and half PPR, Abdullah should actually get enough work to score something for you. Dude, I mean, like I'm at the point in my league where I am combing waivers and I'm looking at do I want to start Raheem Mostert or Amir Abdullah? Because I 4 of my 5 running backs are out this week. Like if you're doing that, I actually don't hate Abdul at all. He should get enough work. The game script should be right. And good chance he falls in the end zone. That is if Madison and White are out. So plan accordingly. I think these are not the worst guys though to throw on your bench if you think you might need an emergency RB2 this week. Buccaneers, pretty straightforward, man. You are never, ever sitting Baker Mayfield. Not now, not for the rest of the year. He has fantastic matchups. He's been fantastic all year. Mike Evans is back. They're rolling. Start them both with confidence. Bucky Irving is currently the ECR QB or RB7 this week, which is incredible. He is PFF's #1 overall graded running back in a bunch of metrics. He is top 5 and a bunch of other efficiency metrics. Just fantastic, dude. Bucky is the man. You're starting him in your lineups. I feel like he really took over that role, especially in their post-buy adjustment. And then this one's a little more controversial because he has had a rough 3 weeks. Cade Otton, I think with the soft matchup and with the fact that the Raiders may push them to have to pass the ball. I mean, if the Panthers were moving the ball like that, I actually do think the Raiders will as well. I like Cade Otton this week as an emergency streamer, not even an emergency streamer. You probably are rostering him on 2 tight end rosters. Maybe you have a bye, maybe you have an injury, whatever. I think Cade Otton's a perfectly reasonable start this week. He obviously does not have the ceiling he had without Evans, but I still think he'll get enough of a target share, enough of the opportunities against a bad enough defense. I like him as a start. Sitting Jalen McMillan, simply not a fantasy relevant guy. He may get his looks, but he's just not. And then your sort of tricky decision is Rachaad White. We told you guys last week, we told you guys the week before. In games where they're trailing, I don't mind Rachaad White, or in full PPR. You need to make starts like that sometimes. I don't mind him. That's what makes him a sort of tricky decision. But in this one, where I think they're going to have a lead for the most part, I think they're going to grind out the clock, and Bucky's looks so goddamn good, right? That just sort of relegates White to a tricky decision. Again, I have a roster with 2 or 3 buys on it. I am starting White in my RB2 spot. He's certainly not unstartable. He's certainly not dead. He may get in the end zone. They give him enough work, right? That's certainly possible. And in PPR, he'll have 4 to 5 receptions probably. So you could do a lot worse, but I'm also not injecting him into my lineup. You can feel free to slot in some of your more productive players over in this week.
Yeah. I am happy to report to the free Tendies fantasy community that a team that I drafted with Bryce Young is the quarterback 1, Daniel Jones is the quarterback 2, Travis Etienne is my running back 2, and Ben Sano is my tight end 1, has clinched the fantasy playoffs, mostly due to Bucky Irving. So I am the number 1 Bucky fan in the world. I do want to cool the temperature on this just a little bit, I have him as like rock solid to high end RB2 right now. Reason being is that he just hasn't completely taken over the backfield. Rachaad White is still involved in a sense. I think that it's very clear at this point, especially after last game, Bucky had the breakout. He is the guy to own in this backfield. He's the A side of the backfield. But to Yanni's point, and like he said, right, like Rachaad White still has a role in this offense. To me, it's looking like a 40%-ish role, right? And he gets passing work. So it's not that Rachaad White is dead. It's just that Bucky Irving is now the favorite side, I think. And just be reasonable with your decisions. But I think that I can't imagine a lineup where you wouldn't want Bucky in there unless you had a great draft. And that's really all I had. All right, next we got the Cleveland Browns going into Pittsburgh to play my favorite team, the Steelers. The Browns have an implied team total of 18.5 points, and the Steelers have an implied team total of 25 points. For the Browns, we're starting famous Jameis Winston, David Njoku, and new wide receiver 1, Jerry Jeudy, one of Yanni's favorite players for sure. And then we are tricky decisioning Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, and Jerome Ford as a DFS call out. Then for the Steelers, we are begrudgingly starting Russell Wilson, George Pickens, and Najee Harris. Then we're going to tricky decision Jalen Warren and the Muth. So let's start with the Browns first. My man, the ultimate wild card, Jameis Winston. He got that roster I just told you all about into the fantasy playoffs with a 42-point performance on Monday night. Listen, man, Jameis, for better or worse, is going to go out there and just sling it. I love the guy. He's great for fantasy. He's great for all walks of fantasy, right? He gave the Denver Broncos 20 points on defense. He gave all of his receivers a giant boost. He himself had over 40 points. We're not going to tell you to tricky decision Jameis because that was such a good performance. I think the Browns are clearly at this point more of a passing team than anything else. I think they should continue to go as a passing team. The variance of Jameis is just baked in to what Jameis is. I think that it's like low effort content to tell you, oh, well, Jameis is a tricky decision. He might throw interceptions. Yeah, no, duh. That's what the player is, right? But against the Steelers team where Joe Burrow threw on last week with at least moderate success, we think he'll be able to get you there in fantasy. A turnover is only -2, right? You got to hope that he kind of outpaces that with his big throws and touchdowns. David Njoku he's just a monster, man. I think it's been 2 straight weeks where he's gone up over a defender in the end zone and mossed someone. He's a very, very good player in a team that wants to throw the ball, right? He's dominating those short to intermediate routes. He's a big body. I'd like him as like a rock solid tight end 1 this week. He's probably inside my top 5. Then Jerry Jeudy, man, I think that sometimes a change of scenery really helps the player, right? We've seen flashes where Jerry Jeudy has looked good in Denver, but it just wasn't the right fit at the end. There was the whole Jag argument. Now we've seen him on this Browns team. He's really kind of done something. He's done something really impressive. I think he's clearly emerged as Jameis's number 1 target. I know we were telling you Cedric Tillman before, but sometimes when you're out with a concussion and then your running mate goes for over 200 yards in a game against the Denver Broncos, you're the new number 1. Start him with confidence here. I believe Joey Porter Jr. has 6 defensive penalties for like pass interference over the past 2 weeks. we'll see how he does in that matchup. Then Elijah Moore, Cedric Tillman, these guys are just kind of, the outside options in the passing game. If you think it's a pass heavy game script from Jameis who can sustain multiple wide receivers, we like both of them. I like Tillman more than Elijah Moore. I think that Yanni probably agrees with that. Elijah Moore gets he's getting fed like constant targets, but they're the lower value ones. Tillman's getting some more downfield work, more end zone looks, that type of stuff. I like Tillman as a rock solid or high upside flex. Moore is more like an emergency start. Then Jerome Ford for DFS. On Monday night, he split the work with Nick Chubb. I think that the Browns are kind of finally starting to understand, hey, Nick Chubb's not completely right here. Let's share the workload. Ford had a couple impact runs. It was nothing crazy, but he did get you there. And we also did not list Nick Chubb. I'm surprised we didn't see that. He's going to be a sit for me, though. Yanni, do you think he's a sit this week?
I know he had 2 touchdowns against the Steelers last week, or last time they played, but he had like 40 yards and 2 touchdowns, right?
Yeah.
Um, I just probably would prefer not to. Ford, so that's weird. We're not saying that Ford's gonna have a better game than Chubb. We're saying that Ford is a perfectly viable DFS option because of the cost reward ratio. But for Chubb and redraft, yeah, I have him in 2 or 3 rosters, and I'm keeping him on the bench this week. He did not look right, dude. He hasn't looked right all year, and it looks like they sort of tapered off of him last week. And honestly, to me, Ford looked like the better running back last week. So that's sort of where the DFS tag on Ford comes from. Is I think he's sort of a sneaky full PPR play this week,
Mm-hmm.
more so in DFS.
Then for the Steelers, man, they made me look stupid last week. I think I said the Steelers not built to keep up in a shootout. Little did I know Russ was going to throw for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. I think a lot of that has to do with the Cincinnati Bengals defense, but it would be irresponsible of us to tell you that there is not some appeal here for him as a start. I would temper expectations. I think 20 or less is more likely than not, but you could do worse than him, I guess. George Pickens, same idea, right? He's a target monster. He's a very talented player and a target monster. If anyone's going to score in the passing game, I would bet a lot of money it was him. I know that Russ, I think he completed a pass to like 8 or 9 different guys last week. It was an oddly spread out one. That's not typically the Steelers. Typically, the Steelers are highly concentrated towards feeding George Pickens. I would kind of assume that's what's going to happen, right? Also, another note is Denzel Ward left Monday night. He's the cornerback for the Browns. I believe he's ranked as the second best corner according to PFF. I don't know if he's going to go this week. If Denzel Ward does not go this week, the Browns like to play a lot of man. I think George Pickens has a good chance to moss a backup Browns corner if that's the situation. Then Najee Harris got a lot of work last week against the Bengals. I think the Bengals bottled him up pretty decently, but he had a larger share of the workload than he had had since Jalen Warren had been healthy. Is that indicative of the future? I don't know. What I think I know for sure, though, is Najee's going to get more carries than Jalen Warren. He is the preferred back in this backfield. I think that if someone's going to fall in the end zone at the goal line, it's most likely to be Najee. I like him as like a mid to low end RB2. Nothing crazy, but I would still start him. Then we're going to tricky decision, the Muth and Jalen Warren. Jalen Warren, this is like a, you know, you're maybe getting 35 to 40% of the work in the backfield, but he's getting those higher value targets out of the backfield on third and long, right? That type of work. He's going to be pass blocking. He doesn't need as many touches as Najee to get you there. If you are looking for a desperation 5 to 10 points in a flex spot, I think he might be able to do that for you. And then the Muth. The Muth has kind of been down this season from where he was drafted. He did get 15 points last week. He did get into the end zone. I think the way you should be looking at the Muth is that he's one of the better passing options in this Steelers offense. And if you think that Russell Wilson will have success throwing the ball, then Muth becomes like a actual potential start question. It's just a matter of where you're at with Russ, right? I'm not as high on Russ as the market, but I can see an argument for him doing well here. And Muth is like he's a great player. He just they don't use him enough, right? And usually the quarterback can't feed him. I think that he's worth a shot this week. I don't love him. I would start Tucker Kraft over the Muth. I would start Mark Andrews. Well, Mark Andrews is on bye. Would you start Kate Otten or the Muth, Yanni?
I think I prefer Cade just a little bit, but that's close.
Yeah,
That's very close.
that's like the territory of tight end. I think that he is this week, just generally speaking, right? Low end one might throw him in there with a bunch of buys. What do you think, Yanni? Was I respectful to our friend Russ?
Well, yeah, you're fine, man. Look, Russ has had 50-50, man. You're going to get one of two things based on his starts this year. You're going to get a low floor game or you're going to get a solid back end QB1 game. He had about 270 yards, 13.8 points against the Browns last time. He was able to move the ball. He's at home, should be a little more comfortable in the offense. Again, man, when we say start, we're talking about like start for the range that you usually look at Russ at, which is 6 teams are on by. You may be grabbing a guy off waivers. You could do a lot worse. Do I think he's going to have an explosive week, another 400-yard week? Absolutely not. But fair enough. He'll get his yards.
Who would you rather start this game, Yanni? Jameis or Russ? Who are you taking?
Russ.
I thought you were a
Easier
Jameis guy.
It's just the easier defense. Dude, going against the Browns defense versus the Steelers is a totally different thing.
If Denzel Ward is out, I would agree with you, actually. And I don't like Russ.
Okay, Jags at Titans. Trevor Lawrence placed on season-ending IR today. The Jags with an implied team total of 18. The Titans with an implied team total of 21.5. Look, man, there's not a whole lot to say about this Jaguars team. I believe ETN got 16 opportunities last week. I believe it was 13 carries, 3 targets. So he's like getting that low end RB1 workload. It's just not worth a shit in the offense the way it is. You're getting low end RB1 workload with or an anemic Doug Peterson offense that it would appear the league's figured out, and Mac Jones at quarterback, right? Actually, I thought Mac played just fine last week. He cost us the Texans spread with a backdoor cover. The Texans are a pretty good defense. So, like, he did fine. And in that spirit, we're comfortable starting Brian Thomas Jr. or Ingram this week. I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. should have had like one of the best games of the whole NFL season last week. If they could have just hit him in stride on a few plays, they could not. So I think between the game script, between the target share, I believe he was at 10 or 11 targets last week. He had a really healthy target share. I'm fine flexing Brian Thomas Jr. I mean, I'm not really in a rush. So I'm starting in full PPR. I'm starting DeAndre Hopkins over him in 2 leagues. So that kind of gives you an idea of his range, back end wide receiver 2 for me. If Trevor were in, I would certainly start him over DeAndre Hopkins. So it's really just a matter of who his starting quarterback is here. And then I guess the more interesting point to make is about the Titans this week. I know Tony Pollard had a fumble last week. I know his numbers have dropped off a little bit with Tajay Spears, but this is a really bad defense. This is a defense that just had their quarterback put on season-ending IR. This is a defense with a lame duck head coach. I think that the Jaguars are just in disarray, man. They hemorrhage yards. I absolutely love this week. If you need to stream Levis, if you need a quarterback to stream Levis. Get Pollard in your lineup. Get Ridley in your lineup. I know Ridley's probably floating as your wide receiver 4 or 5, depending on where you drafted him, which for me, like all year on my rosters, he's been that guy that's in and out of the starting lineup based on matchups. I think this is one where you can absolutely rip him. Revenge game. They sort of left him for dead, said he wasn't worth a whole lot, got rid of him. Now he gets to come back, and he's been tremendous for the most part since Hopkins is gone. I love Ridley. I love having him in my fantasy rosters. And then probably the weirdest thing this fantasy season is like top 5 or 6 in receiving touchdowns. Westbrook and Ikine. I've never said his name out loud. Who is absolutely balling out with Will Levis for the last like 5 or 6 weeks. Look, man, that's cool. Super athletic dude, fast guy, is getting all these touchdowns. How stable is it? How real is it? For me, this is more one where I'm going to go through and I'm going to see what DraftKings has him priced at. If DraftKings has him at the right price, I am more than comfortable throwing him in there as a cheap wide receiver that apparently has real upset. This Jaguars defense is horrible, man. I think, I think everyone is live when they are going against this team. I even don't hate Spears. If you need an emergency streamer at RB2 this week, if you're freaking out, I even don't hate it if you want to take a look at Tajay Spears. We didn't put him on here because he really has not been a fantasy relevant asset this year. But if you're in that dire of straits, this defense is bad enough, you can at least debate picking him up and throwing him out there. I probably wouldn't want to. That's, again, why we didn't list him, but something you can consider.
Yeah, at least the argument for Nick Westbrook-Ikine, right? It's not it's not that he's out here like Brian Thomas Jr. I'd say in this game, clearly, I would take. I think that like it takes three Nick Westbrook Akines to make one Brian Thomas Jr., right? I think that BTJ is three times as talented. But Nick Westbrook Akine is on the field for 100% of snaps. This is that concentrated offense argument we're telling you about. It is exclusively Ridley and Westbrook Akine. So, I mean, yeah, if you like Will Levis here, I would roll him. I would roll him. I think that he's a perfectly fine flex. All right, next we got my second team, the Carolina Panthers, going into Philly to play the Eagles. We'll see if they can put out another good performance. Vegas doesn't think so, though. They only have the Panthers at a 16.5 point implied team total. We got the Eagles at 29. For the Panthers, we're just starting Chuba and Adam Thielen, and we're going to sit everyone else. Then for the Eagles, we are tricky decisioning Grant Calcaterra, and we're going to start everyone else. So let's start with the Eagles first. I think this one's pretty easy, right? Coming off only, they were only the second team in the NFC to ever beat Lamar Jackson, which is impressive. I think that this team has arrived. They're here. They have an identity. They know what they're good at. This is a, to me, this seems like a they're going to run the ball down the Panthers' throat type of game and play good defense. Jalen Hurts always liable to get into the end zone on the tush push. Saquon Barkley, fantasy asset number one on the year if you drafted him. I actually heard a funny stat from the underdog guys. If you have Saquon Barkley on your roster and underdog, your advance rate is 51%, and it doesn't matter for the rest of your team. Just 51% of teams with Saquon Barkley advanced. So that's how much of like a force he's been this year. He's looking to maybe crack 2K yards, which would be insane. AJ Brown doesn't get a ton of volume, but big play threat with the go balls from Jalen. Like the spot for him against this Panthers defense is banged up and not good. Devontae Smith off the injury report this week. It looks like he's going to go. Fire him up. This is about as plus of a matchup as it gets. Dallas Goddard. The reason we have Grant Calcaterra as a tricky decision is Dallas Goddard. He's not on IR yet. He DNP'd today, and at least what the Eagles are saying that he's week to week with a knee injury. We're assuming he's not going. He, I mean, if you want to roll Grant Calcaterra, right, and you want to say, oh well, this is a plus matchup, you could do it. I just don't think like what is he option number four on this offense, and I think this is going to be the Eagles feeding their studs, getting a lot of fantasy points. Maybe Calcaterra gets in there, but I think you could probably do better. Then for the Panthers, man, what a great story. Bryce Young has turned it around and played some really good football over the past 4 weeks. He's actually leading the league since he got the starting job again in terms of explosive plays, like from the quarterback position, which is nuts. He's had 9 of them. Listen, man, I thought his career was toast. I thought that he was not a real NFL player. I think that he's shown, though, over this small sample size, not that he's a superstar or anything, but that he belongs on an NFL field at a minimum. That being said, this Eagles defense is a monster. They just destroyed Lamar Jackson. They've been destroying everyone ever since Cooper DeJean, my pick for defensive rookie of the year, has gotten into the lineup. This Eagles team has been undefeated. Sirianni is a culture changer. As soon as he shaved his head, he just turned the team around. You don't find leadership like that very often. So we're only going to start Chuba because I mean he's a bell cow. I get that he lost the Panthers the game almost exclusively on Sunday with his fumble, but he's been too good the rest of this year. All of you Jonathan Brooks bag holders who are kind of waiting for Dave Canales to punish Chuba, give Jonathan Brooks 50% of the workload. It's not going to happen here. We don't see it happening here. I'm not in the Panthers locker room, so I don't know for sure, but I would say like there's a 98% chance Chuba continues to get that bell cow usage. And then Adam Thielen, man, surprisingly good for being 50 years old. Injured half the year, so I think that we all forgot about him. But this was Bryce Young's number one target by far last year. He's continued to lead the Panthers in targets, in yards. He should have had 2 touchdowns last week. I think he got 19 fantasy points and half PPR without that touchdown that got called back that shouldn't have. I mean, if you think anyone's going to score in the passing game here, it would be Thielen. What do you think, Yanni?
Not a whole lot to add, man. Pretty straightforward. I do actually think Brooks is going to get a healthy-ish workload, but I think Chuba should. I would assume that. So last week, Brooks had 100% of the running back target share out of the backfield. I don't think that was. I think that was just a drive where that happened. I don't think that's like their plan. If they fall behind, I fully expect Chuba to be getting dump offs. So to me, I think he's going to eat on those dump offs a lot. They're a very stout rush defense, which I think totally blanks Brooks, and I think Chuba will get his yardage on the passing game. So I actually really like him this week. I saw some people freaking out a little bit on Twitter. That's ridiculous. He's a very, very talented running back, and they paid him, so he'll be good to go this week.
That is a good point you bring up, right? Because Brooks, at least what Dave Canales said was that they exclusively gave Brooks 1 or 2 drives, right? And Chuba didn't get any targets out of the backfield, and Jonathan Brooks got them all. To Yanni's point, what I wonder if like maybe that Jonathan Brooks drive was like schemed up like to get him looks. You know what I mean? So I just wonder, right? Like I don't know. Chuba's still a RB2 for me, right? Like he's a
Oh, yeah.
RB2 that you got in like the 10th or 11th round of drafts and have been extremely happy with. I don't think that Brooks's involvement changes anything. I think maybe 8 touches, 5 to 8 touches, I think, for Brooks. Like not a ton, but your Chuba shares will be fine, I think.
What I would just throw in there though, that's exciting, I guess, and whether or not this manifests this year is a different question. It's just worth noting. Brooks looked fantastic. He was making dudes miss. He was cutting hard. He was generating his own yardage. He was trucking dudes. He looked really, that 18-yard reception he had was beautiful. He looks to me, he was Bijan Robinson's backup. He looks a lot like Bijan out there, like a lot like Bijan. I think next year that guy's a dude. He looked tremendous. I was really excited seeing him play. So it is something, I mean, worth watching, but I don't think this year it's going to manifest. I think Chuba's going to be a locked and loaded at the worst case scenario, low end RB2 rest of season.
Yeah, I think that to your point, right?
That's most.
Brooks is a great player. This is nothing about Brooks the player. We're saying
Yeah,
we don't like him. I think it is just a next year play, right? But it could be one of those backfields where you have 2 fantasy relevant running backs, which is always fun.
I think it will be. I think it will be. Okay, Falcons at Vikings, the Kirk Cousins revenge game, albeit an unexciting revenge. I don't know how much revenge he's going to be getting. Falcons 21.5 implied team total, coming off a really rough week, man. In a game they probably should have won if Kirk doesn't throw 4 picks. Vikings 26-point implied team total, coming off what I think was one of their best wins of the year. They had to come back in pretty tough conditions, really for a couple weeks now. They've had to really battle out there and looking really good. And the 26-point implied team total reflects that. For the Falcons, look, man, we all know what the deal is. Bijan, we are finally getting the fucking legend we were promised in the draft, right? The guy that I wasted a season drafting 6th overall his rookie year and just lit a team on fire, but it was worth it. It was worth it to be excited about it now. He's fantastic, man. I probably one of my favorite players to watch in football. The cutting, the trucking, the all of it, just awesome. Looks a lot like prime Todd Gurley out there playing in a similar system. You're never sitting him. I just had to give a little love letter to Bijan. He's carrying me on one of my teams right now. Drake London, been fantastic all year. It's really interesting. He seems to be, he didn't have the best game last. I believe maybe I'm just making this up. I believe he had 7.6 last week, if I recall. He was in a tough matchup for me. But overall, London's been a fantastic player. I'm seeing some people mock drafting him top 20 next year. I don't know about that. We'll have to see how he does when Michael Penix gets in there before the end of the season, which I do think will happen. But he's a start, certainly. And Mooney, I think the game script's going to be such that you can get him in there. I think he's going to be pretty good. Dude, he's been really good for the most part this year. You do need Kirk to show up and play a competent football game, which, revenge game, indoor at the dome. I like a lot of the factors going into this game for at least him to be able to get yards. However, he's a sit for us, and so is Kyle Pitts. I've been the resident Kyle Pitts hater for like 3 years now. I've never owned a share of Kyle Pitts. I will never own a share of Kyle Pitts in fantasy. I just don't think he's a productive football player. Not much more to say about that. And then Kirk Cousins, look, man, coming off what is arguably the worst game of his career, that lollipop that he threw on the sideline, that really soft throw that created the first pick 6 was so bad, dude. I don't know. I'm not an orthopedic surgeon, right? But what I wonder is, based on what I've heard kind of about those injuries, is I wonder if he's getting like tightness or like a wear and tear, like a stamina issue he's having building up in his Achilles. Dude, he's an older guy. He's coming off a major injury. You have muscular compensation in the leg when you have an injury like that. I just wonder if he's not mechanically what he was. It doesn't seem like he's driving the ball to me. And I know there's been games this year where he has, but then there's been games where he just flat hasn't. Last week was really bad. I think this will be really telling. I actually expect them to go to Penix next week if he has another like 2 or 3 pick game here. And look, man, this is Brian Flores going against a Shanahan scheme. He's been really, really good this year against this specific scheme and against far better quarterbacks than Kirk. So I think it's going to be an ugly one, to be honest with you. But I still like Mooney, London, and Bijan. For the Vikings, Sam Darnold, dude, very sneaky waiver wire pick if you picked him up this year. He's been excellent for the most part. I really think he's excelled as a fantasy asset. I was checking out his last month, and it's not incredible, but like good, very, very good. When you need a spot start from your quarterback position, he's more than capable to do it. I think he will do it this week, especially against the soft defense. I actually love Sam Darnold this week. Aaron Jones, I know he's had some fumbling issues. I know he's had some getting in the end zone issues, but this is still, again, a very approachable matchup. You want to get your guys in here. Justin Jefferson, I know he's been a little disappointing on a per game basis this year. I saw him, I don't recall exactly where he is, but he's a lot lower in the top 12 than you would have hoped when you picked him this year. It seems like defenses have changed the way they covered him. It seems like Hawkinson and Addison are sort of eating off that. They're working through it. But come on, man. You're never sitting him. Hawkinson, he's had like 3 or 4 really good weeks since he came back. He's had some down weeks too, but that is the tight end position. At least you have legitimate 12 to 15 point half PPR upside per game. Not every tight end has that. Actually, very few tight ends have that, and he's been basically alternating good game, bad game, good game, bad game. I do like the volume here. I like the player. He should only get healthier as the year goes on. Like by the fantasy playoffs, he should be rolling a lot better than he was 5 or 6 weeks ago, assuming he doesn't have a setback. You're certainly starting him this week. Addison is going to be your sort of tricky decision. Addison is a boomer bust prayer flex play. You're going to play him, and one of 2 things is going to happen. You're going to get 4 to 6 points, and he's going to lose you your week, or you're going to get 15, 20, 25 points, and he's going to win you your week. Good luck. He might do one or the other. I have no idea what to tell you about Addison. I would be lying if I said I could predict what makes him the player he is, what makes him the play he is in fantasy. I've owned him off and on rosters for 2 years now. It was an adventure last year making a playoff run with Addison as my flex, which I did do in 2 leagues. This year I have him on a few rosters. He's on the bench. But dude, with all the buys this week, if you really need upside, and especially like if you're projected to lose by 10 or 15 points and you want to throw a Hail Mary because most of your team's on bye, I don't mind it at all, man. The upside is clearly there. And if Kirk shows up in this game, this may be one of those games where we get the 55, 65 point team total. Vegas has them at 47.5. It's one of the higher over-unders for the week. And that's what I got on the game.
Yeah, I think to Addison, the point about Addison, right? Like, I think that the Vikings, they have incredible weapons on that team. I think that they're almost like the Lions in the sense that there's a ton of like dudes that they have at the skill positions. I think that they just have a worse quarterback in Sam Darnold, right? So with teams are like rolling coverage towards Justin Jefferson. They're bracketing him. They're trying to force Sam Darnold to throw the ball elsewhere. I like the spot for Jordan Addison, man. Do I think he's consistent? No, but I think he's very Jamison Williams in like the type of player that he is. Then for the Falcons, want to touch on Kyle Pitts for a little bit. I think that there is a noticeable change going on here with the Falcons. Pitts got a goose last week, and I believe he was on the field for like 20% of snaps. So what's happening is the Falcons are saying, all right, Kyle Pitts, you are exclusively a pass catcher. You're not blocking, or we don't want you in the game if we're going to run the ball, right? I think that because we've seen Bijan kind of taking off, the Falcons have become more run first with Kirk obviously showing his limitations from his injury. That's getting Kyle Pitts off the field. This week, though, the Vikings are top 5 in the NFL in rush defense. A lot of that is because the Brian Flores zone blitz. They bring a lot of guys. So I wonder, I think they're going to try and force the Falcons to throw here, right? I wonder if they'll say, okay, Kirk, like the entire game plan is get the ball out of your hand quickly, and they split out a lot of guys wide. I wonder if Bijan will underperform a little this week. I wonder if Kirk will overperform a little bit this week. I wonder if Pitts will actually be more involved. I think Charlie Warner was on the field more in the last game than Kyle Pitts, which is like alarming. I think that if you drafted a Kyle Pitts share, there is no hope that it's getting better, at least this year. Maybe he needs a change of scenery or something. And then just the Kirk revenge game, right? We'll see what happens here. I know Kirk has not looked good at points this year, like especially lately. I believe in the last 3 games he has 0 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I think if the Falcons lose this game, they will go to Michael Penix to try and make the playoffs. But we'll see if Kirk has one more magical game left in him, right? We saw this Falcons team beat the Eagles, right? We've seen Kirk magic against the Buccaneers. I don't know. I would still sit him this week, but I think this will be a good game for sure. The Vikings haven't blown anyone out in a long time. All right, next we got the down bad New York Jets going into Miami to play the apparently soft Dolphins. The Jets have an implied team total of 19 points. The Dolphins have an implied team total of 25.5 points. For the Jets, we are starting Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. We're going to sit Aaron Rodgers, and we're tricky decisioning Breece Hall. More on that in a minute. I'm shocked this is where we're at in our fantasy season. And then for the Dolphins, we're going to start Tua, Devon Achane, the least efficient runner of all time, but he is really good at getting in the end zone. Jonnu Smith, I believe he's the tight end 6 overall over the past like 8 weeks. Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, and then we're going to sit Raheem Mostert. So we'll start with the Dolphins first. Yeah, I mean, it was a tough one against the Packers on Thanksgiving. I don't know what you want me to say, man. Tua has like I don't know. Some I saw on Twitter, someone was like, "Yeah, I think like they hit the factory reset on Tua the last time he got concussed, and we're getting Tuscaloosa Tua." Because like over since he's been back, I think he has like 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He's been over 25 fantasy points the last 3 weeks, which is incredible. This Jets defense is not one to be scared of. We're going to start him here. The offense, I would say, has changed a little bit in Miami. They used to be more down the field, deep shot kind of a football team. Now they're kind of living on these short little tiny paper cut targets. And that's where Devon Achane and Johnny Smith are really shining in this like on these shorter A dot throws, right? Devon Achane by the numbers has been one of the absolute worst rushers of the football this year, but he's getting 5 to 7 targets every single week. And then along with like his 60 percentage, 55 to 60 percentage of the workload, he's getting anywhere between like 15 to 20 touches a week. It's not sexy. It doesn't look good, but it's been effective so far. And this is not a great defense. I think ECR has Devon Achane as the RB3 this week, or just rest of season. They have him as the RB3. I'm not nearly that bullish on him, but he's an easy RB1 for me this week, even if I don't like him. Johnny Smith, we just talked about that. Just I believe he had 11 targets last week, didn't he, Yanni?
I don't know the exact number, but he's been tremendous for like a month.
Yeah,
Just tremendous.
I'm kicking myself for not picking him up on waivers and going Will Disley instead. Then Tyreek and
We might
Waddle.
we might play next week with that matchup. We might end up playing me next week with Johnu.
Yeah, we'll see. And then Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. This is just Tua's back. You can roll them. I think to my earlier point, right? Like this offense has changed. The targets have not been as valuable or as present for Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill. I think he's gone over 100 receiving yards once this year. They're still good players, though. There's a chance the Dolphins could lay it on this like Jets team that's just a shell of themselves, right? Like, I think it's very clear Aaron's going to retire. This Jets team, they're going to do a whole franchise reset. Wouldn't be the worst week to see your Dolphins guys get going. Then Raheem Mostert, we're sitting him. The dream is dead. It is Achane is the only guy you can count on in this backfield at this point in time. Jalen Wright, like if you want to chase 7 low value carries, you could, but no, thank you. Then for the Jets, I mean, we're gonna say start Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams, but this is not an easy matchup, and they have not been producing. I think Garrett Wilson has not eclipsed 7 fantasy points over the past 3 weeks. I don't know what to tell you, boys. I think you just gotta write. I think you just gotta write it out. There's too many people on bye this week, right? Like if your
Yeah.
option is Debo Samuel or Garrett Wilson, I'm still starting Garrett Wilson. If your option is I don't know, same game, Jalen Waddle or Garrett Wilson, I'm still starting Garrett Wilson. The talent is there. It's just the quarterback struggling, man. The quarterback and the team as a whole are struggling, and he's kind of getting passed over by Devontae Adams at times for looks. I don't know. It's stinky. It's stinky rolling these guys out here, especially against a defense that ranks 31st out of 32 teams in terms of limiting fantasy wide receiver points. This is not a great matchup. We think that Jalen Ramsey will be on Garrett Wilson, so I like Devontae Adams a little bit more in the spot than Garrett Wilson in a vacuum, but low end wide receiver 2 to flex, I think, for both of them this week. Um, we're sitting Aaron Rodgers. It's Jover. It's completely Jover for Aaron. It sucks to see one of the all time greats go out this way. I really hate it. I don't know though. I know that he said on the McAfee show it was one of his goals this year to play all 17 games, do a full season. I think he's going to do that and walk off into the sunset, unfortunately. Then Brees Hall, tricky decision. It was bad last week. He had 2 fumbles, one of which was recovered by the opposing team. Otherwise, his fantasy day could have been worse. I think he had 12 carries for 60 yards. He popped up on the injury report last week. He ended up going last second. This week, he's already logged a DMP on Wednesday. His health is waning. His production hasn't been great, and we don't even know if he's going to play this week. I think that you could do much better. I think that you could do much, much better. Like we were talking about it pre-show, I would legitimately roll Rico Dowdle this week over Brees Hall. Be reasonable with your expectations. Don't sit Brees Hall because you're making a statement and you need to on the last week of the regular season, right? If you have no other options, play him. But I think that the entire expectation of Brees Hall in this stinky cheese version of the Jets, like, just has to change. I think he is a RB2 now. Like, not even like a high end RB2. Like, for me, he's just straight up an RB2. That's not to say that he doesn't have a place in your lineup, but if you can do better, I don't mind sitting the big name here. What do you think, Yanni?
Yeah, so I mean, I was just checking while you were saying it. Just, what we're really saying is the old Brees Hall is gone, right? I mean, is he like a non-fantasy asset? So in half PPR, he has nine. This is his last 5 games: 9.4, 9.5, 10.3, 27.6, 6. So it's just that it seems like his monster floor is gone, and it seems like he's less often hitting his monster ceiling, and he's dealing with health issues.
Yeah.
Just really tough, man. Brees is one of my favorite players in football. He won me $1,200 last year. Like I love Brees. I would have drafted him number 1 overall this year. If I had just said screw it, I'm going by my own rankings, I had him as the number 1 overall player in fantasy this year, and it's just not the case. One quick note about this game: Sauce Gardner may miss. Looks like Sauce Gardner may be out. Might be, right? If he is, that's a little bump to an already pretty good matchup for Hill and Waddle.
Emphasis on the word little because Sauce Gardner hasn't been very good this year. I don't know what's happened to him. This entire Jets team has just been a terrible
No,
product to watch. I would say though, this fade on Brees Hall, it has nothing to do with the talent of the player, right? Like, I think that he's just as talented as he was before. It's not the old Brees Hall is gone in the sense that he's no longer talented. It's just that this version of the Jets is so bad, right? I think he'll be a player that you can get next year and redraft at probably a discount that will be well worth it. I think, like, if you can snag Brees Hall like middle of the second round, end of the second round, I would probably rip that. It depends though. That's
yeah.
a long way. Long way still next year's draft.
I just real quick, I was thinking about your trade of ETN for Bucky Irving that you did earlier this year. Um, I traded Garrett Wilson and James Cook, right, which was a heavy price tag. I traded that for Jamar Chase and ETN. I don't think I would regret that. I don't think I regret that looking back on it. My team went from 2 games under 500 to I'm in contention for the second round, second seed and the bye, because I traded basically James Cook and Garrett Wilson for Jamar Chase, which is pretty crazy when you just think about where Wilson was valued in the draft, right?
Mm-hmm.
How productive Cook has been, and the fact that I think I'm very happy I got off him for that. And just something I was thinking about, that would have sunk my season if I had kept him, dude. That's crazy. Bummer about Garrett Wilson. Okay. Saints 22.5 implied team total. I've at the Giants 19-point implied team total. I have not checked whether or not it's going to be DeVito or Locke starting. I would assume, if they were being honest, it will be DeVito, based on how they said their depth chart shook out, that apparently they decided DeVito's higher. I just don't know if Locke playing decent football last week may jar them into keeping him in there. I really don't know what the Giants are going to do. I don't know if it matters that much what the Giants are going to do. A hilarious set of starts for the Saints here. Look, I think Derek Carr, if you need to stream someone this week, depending on how stingy your league waiver wire is, like, Dude, I was looking at some wires that are bare. It seems like everyone's rostering 2 QBs this year, and also 6 quarterbacks are on bye. So like waivers are really, really bad. I actually think Derek Carr is perfectly reasonable, dude. Like I don't know, I think like 14 to 16 points is what perfectly reasonable means. But I mean, he has had 20+ point games this year. It's within his range of outcomes, and this is the defense you would see it against. So if you need an emergency streamer, rip Derek Carr. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I cannot believe that he is listed as a start on our list, but he's had like 3 weeks that range from like a flex wide receiver to like a low end wide receiver 1 since he has been with Derek Carr. I had no idea. I don't know what to say about that. That's very fantasy football, man. That is very fantasy football that he's like outscoring Justin Jefferson the last 3 weeks. He is. Alvin Kamara, probably my favorite expensive DFS play this week. If you're going to spend up on a player, I would most certainly do it for Alvin Kamara here. The Giants hemorrhage rush yards on the ground. I don't know if they're going to activate Kendry Miller off the IR. You just had Taysom Hill out for the year. It is just Alvin back there. He should absorb a massive target share. He should absorb a massive rushing workload. He is going to be in all my DFS slates this week, and I recommend he's in yours too. Just a tremendous start this week for him. Good luck if you're going against him in redraft, trying to claim a playoff spot. And then Johnson, Juwan Johnson.
Yep.
Right? Juwan. It's very odd, like his last name. Actually, a good athletic tight end and a player that maybe we see be worth rostering as a tight end too toward the end of the season. But for now, we're going to tell you to sit him. Derek Carr does like him. He has a level of rapport. He picked up 7 targets last week. Taysom Hill's out. Obviously, this is a team that has a propensity for using tight end. So like it's not, and Derek Carr likes tight end. But there's the other dude there, backup from the Raiders last year. Mayer, no.
Who's the other Foster Moreau.
Big white fella, yeah, the cancer survivor, Foster Moreau. And he's actually a pretty good tight end too. They sort of split work, so it's not like it's just Smith here. So I'm not going to tell you guys to pick him up, and I'm certainly not going to tell you to start him this week. For the Giants Neighbors, that elite ceiling that we really were all freaking out about for the first 3 or 4 weeks, that is gone with Neighbors. He's been banged up. He's been injured. They've switched quarterbacks. It's a whole multitude of factors. I know he's the wide receiver 12 in points per game in PPR right now, and I know he's, I believe, either first or second in the league in target share. Look, the usage is really great, but what does it actualize into is a matter of what the quality of the targets are and what the quality of the offense is that's around him. And in the beginning of the season, it was enough such that he was one of the best assets in fantasy. It's simply not that anymore. He's also tailed off a little bit as a player. Like he's dropping balls, I noticed. I noticed his hands are not great this year. He's had like a little bit of an issue. And, he even had to address it after the game last week. So I think you start him because of the insane usage, because of wide receiver 12 in points per game on the season in full PPR. Like that's still very solid. But you have to understand that those numbers are derived in part from the really big first month he had, and that he's not the same high-end premium asset he was. I'm still flexing him in my leagues with Neighbors, right? Just a little bum that sort of, he was like projected for a minute there at 13, 14 points in half PPR, and that is simply not the case anymore. He's more of a 10 to 11 point projected guy. Tracy Jr., excellent matchup this week. Get him in your lineups. Not a whole lot to say. Fantastic football player. Your roster would have to be loaded. I actually have a weird start sit. Would you start Rico Dowdle or Tracy Jr. this week?
Tyrone Tracy Jr. I have him as an RB1 this week. This is the worst rush defense in the NFL. Start him.
Yeah. But dude, that like was a little hard. So I have Chase Brown, Bucky Irving, Tracy Jr., and Dowdle on that roster, and I was like, well, I have to sit one of them. I sat Dowdle. But yeah, look, Tracy Jr., dude, is just a tremendous football player. Make sure you go get him next year in your drafts too. And then your sit is going to be Locke and DeVito, even though it's a soft matchup. Come on, fellas. There are way better options this week. That is like a bottom 5 play. I hope to God none of you are doing it in redraft. Shame on you if you are. Yeah, that's it, man. I think this one game will be one of the more boring ones of the week.
I have nothing of substance to add to this. I would just like to let you know that my playoff team in Superflex is rostering both Drew Lock and Danny DeVito. Or not Danny DeVito, Tommy DeVito. I also have Danny DeVito on my bench too, bro.
Oh my God, man.
That's an 86 ball club. What do you want from me? Manager of the year, fantasy manager of the year on that one.
Shout out to Tony Soprano. Tommy DeVito just never had the makings of a varsity athlete. And you get the exciting and you get the exciting one.
Well, it's not exciting for me, but we got the Seattle Seahawks going into Arizona to play the Cardinals for the NFC West, I would say. I think that the winner of this game will win the NFC West. The Seahawks have an implied team total of 21 points. The Cardinals have an implied team total of 23.5 points. For the Seahawks, we are starting Geno Smith, Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, and Jackson Smith-Njigba. Then we're going to sit Noah Fant and Tyler Lockett. Then for the Cardinals, we're going to start Kyler Murray, Marvin Harrison Jr., James Conner, and Trey McBride, and we're sitting the rest. So let's start with the Cardinals here. It's a nice concentrated offense. I don't think I have as much to say about this side. It was brutal the last time these two teams matched up for Kyler Murray. He had the terrible pick six. He just hasn't been playing good football over the past couple weeks. I know that his career trajectory, right? If you look at every individual season that he's played, he usually starts out hot and he kind of tails off at the end of the year. I don't know. I wouldn't exactly say that because that's his history, that's what's going to happen in this one. We're still starting him. He presents you the rushing upside with also a cannon arm too, right? It's interesting. I think the Cardinals might need another receiver in the draft, believe it or not, even though they drafted Marvin Harrison Jr., but we still like Kyler here. We think there will be more scoring inside in Arizona, right, versus outside in the rain against the Seahawks last time. Marvin Harrison Jr., we're going to start him this week. I do think that we need to adjust our expectations on this player. To me, for the rest of the season, I have Marvin Harrison Jr. as a high end wide receiver, too. And that's not anything to do with the talent or anything like that, right? I think that I've seen like wide receiver rankings for the rookies this year. I've seen guys like Lad McConkey over him. I've seen guys like Xavier Legette sometimes ranked higher than Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't think that his talent is like the Brian Thomas Jr. or Malik Neighbors level to me. It has nothing to do with his talent. I think that this team very specifically does not really scheme anything open for Marvin Harrison Jr. They ask him to play the traditional X route and they say, all right, buddy, go get open. So they're not really scheming up anything easy for him at this time. So he has to earn every single target that he gets. It's been tough for him. I think that he should have a good matchup here. He should have success here. In theory, he's, in my mind, the clear second best option in this passing game, but we're still going to start him this week with all the buys, but I would adjust expectations on him just a bit. James Conner, he's had a couple bad weeks in a row. The last time these two teams matched up, he was held under 10 rushing yards, which blew my mind. It cost me a lot of money because I had bet the Cardinals that week. We're not going to take that as anything other than an anomaly here. I think this Cardinals team wants to run the ball. They're very good at running the ball for the most part. James Conner is a tough player. We like the matchup here. For me, he's a high end RB2. Then Trey McBride. This guy is just breaking out, in my opinion, even though the touchdowns have not been there. So you haven't seen those exciting fantasy numbers. He has back to back weeks with 12 receptions, which is insane for a tight end. The only thing missing from his game at this point is the touchdowns. I think they're coming. That doesn't mean he's going to get multiple touchdowns in this game specifically, right? But I think those opportunities are coming for him. I think the Cardinals are viewing him as like the primary pass catcher in their offense. I think they're scheming stuff for Trey McBride. He's a stud after the catch. He kind of reminds me of a baby George Kittle a little bit. I really love the player. Start him here with confidence. He's a top 3 tight end for me this week. Then for the Seahawks, I think in order to evaluate the Seahawks team and like decide what you want to do with these guys, you have to like decide what kind of game you think Gino will have and like how you think he'll do passing the football, right? This Cardinals team, we've said it all year. They are undertooled on defense. Like if you look at their defense, they have Buda Baker and then they have like a bunch of like mid-level guys, right? Nobody really pops off the page as a superstar on this team. But Jonathan Gannon has schemed them up pretty well, and I'd say they played like about a like pretty good defense, right? I think they played above like what their talent level is. I think Gino probably doesn't have a great one here, but we're still gonna start him. I know he's been under 17 fantasy points since the bye. He's not gone over that. the Seahawks have kind of found themselves winning more games and not falling behind, so you're not seeing those 50 pass attempt games that Geno has been known to have. If you think this is a higher scoring game, right? If you think the Cardinals are scoring more than 10 points like they did the last time these two teams met, and you think the Seahawks are forced to score, I think it's fine to go with Geno here. Ken Walker, he's also kind of had a disappointing last month of the season. It has nothing to do with the player. He's still very talented. It just has to do with how bad this offensive line is and how they always lose. The Seahawks always get just destroyed on their offensive line in games. There was a very funny sequence last week against the Jets. I don't know if you saw this, Yanni, where the Seahawks were inside the 5. I think they were at the 4-yard line, and they had 7 plays to get in the end zone. They didn't do it, and then on 4th down, Geno took a 20-yard sack. So this line is losing. I think Ken Walker to me is an RB2 this week. I think that has to be his expectation, but he always has the upside of being able to pop off a big run, right? He has elite speed. When he hits a hole, he's gone. It's just, will he find a hole? Then DK and JSN, they're just both really good players, right? I think DK is less like of a talented wide receiver and more of a large buff guy who there's a place for that in the NFL. There's a place for a physical freak. He doesn't have to run the crispest routes if he can just kind of jump over and moss people, beat people off the line on the go ball, that sort of thing. And then JSN has just been, I think, probably the biggest surprise for the Seahawks this year. He's really kind of come into his own over the past month. I believe he's outscored DK Metcalf straight up this year. He leads the Seahawks in receiving yards. I believe he has like 91 targets and only 2 drops on the year. He's had an excellent season so far. I have him as a high-end wide receiver too this week. Then Noah Fant, Tyler Lockett. Just no thank you. The Lockett thing is dead because JSN has emerged, and then Noah Fant, like, are you going to chase the 50 Geno dropbacks if you think it happens? He's like the 4th option on the team. What do you think, Yoni?
Yeah, not a whole lot to say. I mean, I'll let you off the hook a little bit. I was the one that pushed for Geno as a start this week. I'll take the shit on it if it doesn't hit. I'll own up to taking L on that one. I do think I think this is like, how they say that, well, not how they say, how it's been observed that concussions go up like 38% in games where playoffs are on the line. It's pretty crazy. Injuries go up like some crazy percentage. I think this is for the win on the division. I think this is for the right to host a home playoff game. I think this is for the right to have a lead on the other team, like for playoff seeding for who gets to go where. I think we're going to see high-end playoff quality football from two teams that have played really well this year, dude, for the most part. Like, we've seen each of these teams go out there and have a really good goddamn football game, and I think we're going to get that this week. It's indoors, and there's no way, at least in my mind, there's no way that the Seahawks actually stifle the Cardinals the way they did the last time they met. So I do think this is like 35-45 throw territory for Geno. DK popped up this week with his knee injury he's been nursing, but they said it's no big deal and he should be ready to go. I guess it's moderately worth keeping an eye on. If DK misses, then Lockett becomes a good emergency flex if you need to throw a dart.
Who do you got in this one?
It's funny, dude. I'm tempted to go right back in the well and take Cardinals at minus 2.5. Because that is how I felt about these teams when they were playing at Seattle, and I was pretty stunned with the outcome. So I'm kind of tempted to just stick with my original priors here and bet the Cardinals.
Not necessarily a bet for the gambling show, but I think the Cardinals pull this one out for sure, especially at home.
I think the Cardinals win. I think the Cardinals get their rushing game going. I think they're probably going to have to be willing to let Kyler run some read option this week. You try to avoid that because Kyler's so small. We talked about it last week when he took like one big hit and he looked like he had a car crash, right? But I think you have to start doing some of that when you're in contention to win your division and host a playoff game. So I think if they bring back the Kyler read option, run a little read option with James Conner, Trey Benson's look pretty good. I think their rushing attack is, to me, it's really just if they can rush the ball, the Cardinals are going to win. So, okay, interesting game. Bears at the Niners. It's worth noting because one of the Seahawks or the Cardinals will lose this week, because it's on the radar, probable, I would say, that the Rams lose this week. This is a win or go home game for the Niners still. It's pretty crazy it's dragged on this long, but the division has been down. I just think that's important to keep in mind for what Niners team you expect to show up. I know they're down and I know they're injured, but I do think you're going to get a pretty good shot out of the Niners of what they have left. They're at home. They just got humiliated. This is still a franchise with pride. Look, Bears, 20.5 implied team total going into San Francisco or Santa Clara, as it were, at a 24-point implied team total. For the Bears, I guess a little bit of a going out on a limb here. I am going to say that Caleb is a straight up start this week. I'm perfectly comfortable getting him in my rosters. If you've been like rostering 2 quarterbacks and you have Jaden Daniels and he's sitting this week, roll Caleb. I think that's perfectly reasonable. The only concern there is what 49ers D line shows up. Does Nick Bosa play or not? And what is the game script? If this thing goes negative game script, if the Niners are able to rush the ball on him and Caleb has to drop back and Nick Bosa's in there, then I think you do have to be a little bit concerned that Caleb starts getting lit up here. Right. And if that happens, I don't think you're going to get a ceiling game out of him, but I think he's looked so much better the last 2 to 3 weeks. I'm pretty comfortable if you need a spot start here rolling him. Swift DNP today. Interesting little note here about the Bears running backs and something for you guys that need a spot start, like I was talking about in my league. Swift DNP today, and Roshan is still in concussion protocol. That means Travis Homer would currently be the only healthy running back on their roster. If these guys do not get in at least limited practices by Friday or Saturday, and you need an emergency start, Travis Homer should get 100% of the workload. What is that going to be worth against a 49ers team? Probably not a lot. But could you pencil him in for 4 or 5 dump offs, maybe a few screens, maybe falls in the end zone if they get lucky? And the 49ers have been run onable this year, right? I actually, you might want to add him on your waivers if you can. You can drop him for free if you see these guys getting questionable tags going into Sunday. But if Swift goes, he is a start. DJ Moore is our favorite wide receiver in this core. DJ Moore is a fantastic football player. He has the best rapport with Caleb Williams. Really just an underrated football player, I think, in the NFL as a whole. I love the dude. And I think in this matchup particularly, Charvarius Ward has been getting his fucking lunch money taken out there, dude. And this is a football conversation, not a personal conversation. His family's going through a tragedy. That's horrible. But before that, he was injured and had issues. And then he came back and looked awful when he played. I'm speaking purely about football. I don't blame him at all. If his head is somewhere else, I don't blame him at all for getting injured. He's had stuff he's dealt with. But for the intents and purposes of a fantasy discussion, he has been getting beaten quite a bit on the field. And I expect that to continue with DJ Moore this week. Komet is going to be a straight out sit for us. And then your sort of tricky decisions are going to be Keenan and Odunze. Odunze is like one of the leaders in the NFL in air yards right now. Like he's had multiple 130, 120, 110 yard air yard games. And then you go and look and it's like 20 to 40 of those yards were catchable. He has been so frustrating because I absolutely love Odunze as a player. I think he's a tremendous player. I had a pretty decent exposure to him this year in drafts. And based on the usage and based on how open he is down the field, you would think they would get it going. There's been some disconnect here. Me and Ted have a little friendly pride bet going on how Odunze does this week. Ted's a little more bullish. I'm a little more bearish. I probably would not be starting him in redraft. I just wouldn't. But if you want to take a DFS flyer on him, here's why I think that's not the worst call. Is the Niners have one of the best kept secrets in the NFL. And that is their slot cornerback, the cheetah, little savage, right? Diabador Lenore. Diamador Lenore is an amazing slot, man. And he is so damn fast, and he has blanked much better receivers than Keenan Allen. And Keenan Allen thus far has been Caleb's safety blanket. I actually do not hate it if you want to say that, well, Diamador Lenore is going to blank Keenan. DJ Moore is going to draw. Mustafa's actually been a great over-the-top safety this year. And I believe Hufunga's injury window got opened up this week. They may have Huff back playing center field back there this week. I'm not sure, but they did open his 21-day window. If you want to be a little cute, right, and go take, I think Odunze will be like $4,800 on DraftKings, maybe $5,000. I actually don't hate that at all. For the Niners, a little bit of a hot take here that I'll get to in a second. Kittle is going to be a start. You're never sitting Kittle. Isaac Guerrero is actually, so the Bears have one of the worst defense rates in the league against the outside zone run. Isaac Guerrero is averaging 7.5 yards a carry this year on the outside zone run. He should be getting basically 100% of the workload unless they want to roll Taylor off the practice squad. No, he won't get 100%. The Niners won't do that. But they've used Taylor a little bit this year, but he should be looking at like 60 to 70% of the workload. And at averaging 7.5 yards per carry against a defense that cannot defend the zone run. I love Isaac Guerrero this week. If you were lucky enough to snag him off your waivers, don't you dare leave him on the bench. And then Juwan Jennings. I know this is a really tough secondary matchup, but I think Debo should draw the Johnson matchup. It may be Juwan Jennings, but either way, I don't think you can sit Jennings at this point, right? He's been way too productive with Brock Purdy this year. I don't really know if there's much else to say. It's a very tough secondary. It's a very tough matchup, but I have a very hard time benching Juwan at this point. for a multitude of reasons. Now, I guess the sort of tricky decision here, the hot take, Brock Purdy's actually been a very good fantasy quarterback, even with his dud last week. I think he's the 11th overall scorer in fantasy this year. He had a really bad week last week because of the snow. For the most part, you've actually been able to pencil in 17 to 18 points on the floor, 22 points on the ceiling. He's had a little bit of rushing upside. He's at home, must-win game. I think the Bears are going to push them enough where they have to keep passing. Brock's a perfectly reasonable start this week. He's just, depending on your options, I'm okay if you want to pivot off of him purely because I think they should be able to run the ball. There's a chance they get a lead and hold it, and this is an extremely good Bears secondary. And then Debo, man, it kills me to say he's a sort of tricky decision. I've only drafted one share of Debo in my entire life, and it was this year. Bummer. I think on a lot of rosters, you are probably much closer to sitting him than you are to playing him. Although, if Juwan draws the Johnson matchup, and if they put Debo at wide back, I think that's under. I would guess Debo gets 5 to 7 carries this week, maybe 5 to 7 carries plus a few of those nice little screens or underneath routes they like to throw to him. I don't think the reverse works anymore. I hope they trash that play now and forever. But I think his usage should actually tick up quite a bit with McCaffrey out. Now, he's been one of the worst rushers in football this year when he's carried the ball, unfortunately, but more so for those short screens that he does really, really well. I actually think he's not the worst start this week if you need him in there. I'm just also not like in one league, I had Najee Harris or Jackson Smith and Jigba and Debo, and I had to leave out one of the three. I'm leaving Debo out of those three. So, like I don't trying to think of what a good comparable start is for him.
Calvin Ridley.
Yes, he did. Like I'm going Calvin Ridley there.
I probably would too. What
I would
about same game, Keenan Allen or Debo?
Oh, Debo by far on that one. I would start Debo over Waddle. Yeah, just so that range of kind of wide receiver 2-3 borderline guys. Again, though, dude, I think he's always liable to break one. I think they're going to give him 5 to 7 carries this week. Maybe we see a vintage Debo game. He's been getting trashed online. Dude has a heart of a lion, and I do wonder which Debo shows up here. I have a feeling it'll be the good one. The season is still up for grabs. I mean, a playoff berth is technically still up for grabs, right? So who knows what we get. That's all I've got, man. Brutal as a 49ers fan to go through that and say all that. I can't believe we're talking about Isaac Guerrero.
Yeah. I mean, I think we've seen over the past couple weeks that the 49ers are trying to get Debo more involved. Lately, what has been working is the kick returns. Kind of rough when you have a $30 million kick returner, right? And that's how he's making an impact. I would not be shocked here, especially with CMC and Jordan Mason out, if Kyle Shanahan does not fully trust Isaac Guerrero, that I think that the wide back call is pretty good here. We saw this 2 years ago. The birth of the wide back was when Elijah Mitchell went out hurt, and instead of giving a bunch of run to the backup running back, Shanny was like, all right, well, we're just running Debo on the Jacksonville Jaguars. So yeah, I think they might try and scheme him some looks for success, right? This Niners team is just looking for anything that works at this point. But yeah. All right, next we got the Bills going into LA to play the Rams and Jimmy. The Bills have an implied team total of 27 points. The Rams have an implied team total of 22.5 points. For the Bills, we're starting Josh Allen, James Cook, Khalil Shakir, and Dalton Kincaid. We're going to sit Keon Coleman, who should be back in the lineup this week. And we're going to STD Amari Cooper. Then for the Rams, we're going to start Puka, we're going to start Cooper Kupp, and we're going to start Kyren Williams. I don't know why, but saying Puka and Cooper Kupp back to back is difficult. You guys try it at home. And then we're going to sit Matt Stafford and Blake Corum. So we'll start with the Rams here first. This Bills team, we've told you guys forever. I think this is probably the 5th week straight that I'm going to say it. This Bills team is undersized. They are built to beat Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in the passing game, but they can be bullied in the running game. That being said, it's Puka and Cooper Kupp. You're not sitting them. Cooper Kupp, I think, is getting close to. He's like a wide receiver too to me at this point. I think that Puka is kind of pulled away as the alpha in this wide receiver room. I know he was being drafted like that in the offseason. I wasn't so sure about that. I said, well, I almost see them as the same player. No. It is Puka is the alpha here. So we're going to start both of them. Puka is like a wide receiver 1. Cooper Kupp to me is a mid 2. Then Kyron Williams, we're still going to start him. And I guess we should probably touch on Blake Corum at the same time too, as well, right? So Kyron did not get a touch in the game against the Saints until halfway through the second quarter, and Blake Corum got the entire first series. I think the first 7 touches out of the backfield went to Blake Corum. After that, it was Kyron like the entire rest of the way. The way I kind of break that down, right, is I think that it was a direct result of Kyron and all of his fumbles that he's been having over the past couple weeks. I think Sean McVay said, "All right, well, you're gonna sit the first, you're gonna sit the first drive, right?" So like the first drive, the Rams went 3-and-out, all passes, didn't get to see the running backs, right? Then the next drive, that was the Blake Corum drive. Then after that, it was Kyron the rest of the way. I think he's still clearly a bell cow on this team. I think that Blake Corum is starting to get worked in a little bit, just a little tiny bit. I wouldn't be shocked to see 5 to 7 touches for Blake Corum here, but the rest of that should go to Kyron. The way you want to attack this Bills team is on the ground. We like to start here. Then, based on what this Bills defense is, right, and what they're good at, we are sitting Matt Stafford. He doesn't present you the rushing upside, right? So if you want a good Matt Stafford fantasy performance, you need him to throw like for either 4 touchdowns or like 300 plus and like 2 to 3 touchdowns. I think that's going to be a tough task here against this Buffalo Bills team. You should have better options here. As the resident Russ hater, I would roll Russ instead of Matt Stafford. That's where we're at though with him. Then for the Bills, it doesn't look entirely the same, at least on offense, but this team is still firing on all cylinders right now. Josh Allen is just he's something else, man. He's got super strong arm. He's just a tank. He's fast. He just runs over people. He's, I think, the best to doing it in the league right now, other than Pat Mahomes. Even though he's been passing less, like he's also cut down on his mistakes. Still a very good player. I don't think there would ever be a situation you're not starting Josh Allen. James Cook, same deal. I get that Ray Davis and Tyler Johnson were getting some work, but Cook is the primary back here against a very soft Rams defense. Fire him up for, I think he's good for anywhere between 15 to 20 touches this week. Khalil Shakir has been the most consistent pass catcher on the Buffalo Bills. He's a slot guy. They try and get him short stuff and get him going after the catch, right? He's a big yak guy, yak monster. I think that his role is very consistent and it will continue to be in that like I don't know, like 7 to 8 catch range. Then Dalton Kincaid, he's had a couple bad weeks. He's finally back. He's not the tight end one. Yeah, I when I was like going into this season, I was thinking Dalton Kincaid had an argument to be the tight end one overall. Not the case. I have him as like a mid to low tight end one, but he's still a tight end one in this soft matchup. Sitting Keon Coleman, not in love with the talent of the player. It's going to be his first week back from injury, and now Amari Cooper's on the field too. It just seems like a little bit too much to ask for at this point in time. If he balls out here, maybe it's a different conversation, but I would say sit until further notice. Then Amari Cooper, tricky decision. It's just what are you going to do about this, right? He's been so inconsistent. He has not popped on the Bills yet. He's attached to Josh Allen, though. It's a good offense. In theory, he could get it going. In theory, you could do the hopeful Amari Cooper flex and just hope he has one of his like boom weeks, but I have a hard time projecting that personally. I'm not going to tell you to sit him, but tricky decision is the best I can do. What do you think, Yanni?
No, man, that's it. Yeah, I would prefer not to start Cooper this week, but because of the matchup, and if you're betting on massive regression, you know, if you want to throw a Hail Mary, I just wouldn't. I probably wouldn't. He's much closer to a sit for me.
We are one twisted Matt Stafford ankle away from a Jimmy G appearance this week. We'll see if it happens.
Good luck to you. All right. Chargers at Chiefs. Charge now this game, man. You talk about good football. I cannot wait for this game. Chargers 19.5 implied team total. Chiefs 23-point implied team total at home. Chargers. Okay, you have to imagine, by the way, that Harbaugh is viewing this like his Michigan Ohio State matchup. This is like the gold standard of the NFL, right? You'll know that Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers are ready to compete for a championship when they are competitively playing the Chiefs or potentially beating them, or when they get their first win over them. You have to imagine that weighs heavily on the team, the quarterback, the everything, right? it's just something that's really worth watching. To me, that will be sort of the marker that Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert have arrived as Super Bowl contenders. I don't think they're there yet. I don't think they have the roster to be, but it's an important storyline to keep track of, I think, just for those two story. For the Chargers, you're starting Herbert. You're starting Herbert every week at this point. I don't care if it's a tough defense. You know, there was some concern about what his foot injury was going to look like this year. My understanding, I actually tweeted at a few of the fantasy docs, some of the big accounts. They responded to me personally. It was great. I asked because I was so damn curious coming into this year. I was going to draft a ton of Justin Herbert in round 13, 14 when he was going that late. And, you know, maybe it's the consequence of not critically evaluating it on my own. But also most of the time those guys are right? They told me he will not be healthy all year. I assumed, okay, he won't be healthy all year. That was a miss by me. I think he is a locked and loaded top 8 fantasy quarterback weekly with top 3 or 4 upside, depending on the matchup. This week, I think he's more going to be in that low end QB1 range. You're certainly starting him. Ladd McConkey, he has been on the injury report every week this year. I guess there's the chance that one of these weeks he finally pops up and doesn't go. But whenever I see him questionable and getting all this weird degree of participation all week, I just assume he's going because that's what's happened all year. So we're going to assume he goes. And if he goes, you're certainly going to start him. The Chiefs defense has been leaky the last few weeks, man. They've been leaky against the pass. And then Will Disley, I know he got blanked last week. I know he's not the most flashy or sexy starter, but he did have a pretty good run before that of usage, and they should have to pass a lot here. I actually like Will Disley this week. I'm going to start him in place of Mark Andrews in one league where I have a bye. So I think it's perfectly fine to stream him. And then you're going to sit the running backs, dude. I don't know what you want to do with this backfield beyond J.K. Dobbins. Kamani Vidal clearly is just not ready. He was a guy I like taking some round 15 flyers on this year. I was wrong. A guy I'm proud to say I have 0 shares of. I've never drafted a share of him and never will is Gus Edwards. And I would not start him this week. Please don't do that to yourself. And then our sort of tricky decision is going to be QJ, Quentin Johnson. I like him as sort of a cheeky DFS play. If anyone's going to get volume production outside of Ladd McConkey at the wide receiver position, it is going to be QJ. And if you like this game as a shootout, if you think this is going to be a game where Herbert has to throw 30 times, I actually think QJ will get his. He'll get his in terms of at least opportunities. What he does with those is always a mystery. He may drop them. But that's why he's a sort of tricky decision. I would sit him in redraft. I would take a good hard look at him depending on the price in DFS. And then for the Chiefs, Mahomes has actually been excellent after that narrative that he has not been a high-end fantasy asset. Not excellent. He's been pretty good for 4 or 5 weeks now. I would actually pick him up and start him, or pick him up. I would start him if he's been in your 2 QB rotation all year. I think this is a game where you do want to get him in there, even with the tough defense. I think, again, this is one of those games where it is going to be a playoff vibe. Dude, the AFC West is a shark tank this year. I can't believe that. Even the Raiders play the Chiefs really tightly, by the way, when they play. I can't believe that it has been the quality of teams that we're getting out of there. I did not foresee that this year. I didn't think the Chargers were going to contend for a playoff spot. So, I think we get a really goddamn good football game out of the Chiefs. I think we see maybe playoff Chiefs for the first time this year. We haven't really seen that this year. They've looked bored to me. Ted thinks they've looked dysfunctional. I think they've looked bored. There's really no way to know. It's a very subjective opinion on that, right? I thought they looked dysfunctional last year right up until they beat the Niners for the Super Bowl. So I like Mahomes. I like Pacheco. I like Pacheco less than I did coming into this year because part of that was the massive volume. And also he didn't look totally healthy to me last week. And this is a very tough rush defense, but I do like the odds of him falling in the end zone this week. Kelsey, you're never sitting Kelsey, and Hopkins. I actually think Hopkins is a tremendous start this week. I just like the offensive prospects in this game. I know it's a little bit of a low over-under, but I don't think that's correct. I think this game should be very, very good. I am putting Hopkins in my lineup where I can. And then Hunt, sitting Hunt. You should drop Hunt personally unless you want to hold him purely as a handcuff for Pacheco, but I don't know, man. Pacheco's nice and fresh. He's been off 2 months. The guy's a freaking monster. I dropped Hunt in my league with him. And then sort of tricky decision worthy. This is sort of the same phenomenon as the Odunze phenomenon we talked about. The almost incredible receiver in fantasy, right? Dude, you see every week these plays where they're a foot away from having a massive 11-point play from him and Mahomes. I'm actually curious if Mahomes is maybe dealing with a little bit of arm fatigue. He's played so deep in the postseason for so many. They're getting to the point where they've played an extra half or 3/4 of a season the last 3 or 4 years. That actually really does add up. And Mahomes in the playoffs is sitting there running. He's taking hits. I do wonder if he's got a little bit of arm fatigue because I am shocked to see him missing some of the balls he's missing to Worthy. They're very un-Mahomes-like plays, even though they're incredibly difficult for the rest of the league. Incredibly difficult is the standard form. I just think it's a little interesting. But I do think eventually they get on the same page. And if you think this will be a shootout, fair enough this week. Again, more of a DFS than a redraft thing, but with all the buys, I think I'm going against Worthy in like 3 leagues. So you certainly could put him in your lineup if you need him.
Yeah, I think fun fact for the fans, I guess. Last week, I think Pacheco and Hunt both had 7 carries. They basically split the backfield work. In those 7 carries, Isaiah Pacheco already has a longer rush than Kareem Hunt had the entire time he was starting. So I mean, I don't love the talent of the player, but he's gonna have more juice than Kareem Hunt at this point. And then I guess that's really all I have on this game. I think that there's a bet here for me, though. I will reveal that though at the gambling show. Then I believe this is the Monday night game. I don't think that anyone saw these two teams being where they were when this was scheduled to be Monday night, but it is what it is. We got the Bengals going into Jerry World to play the Cowboys, who are did they win in Jerry World last week? Was that their first win at
I don't know
home?
if it was their first one, but they did pull out the traditional Thanksgiving home game.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so that was their first win in Jerry World since 2023, by the way. So yeah, the Bengals have an implied team total of 27.5 points. The Cowboys have an implied team total of 22 points. For the Bengals, we're starting the usual suspects: Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Chase Brown. Then we're going to sit Mike Gesicki and Andre Yoshivas. Then for the Cowboys, we're going to start Rico Dowdle, CeeDee Lamb, and Fergalicious. And then we're going to tricky decision Cooper Rush. So we'll start with the Cowboys first. Listen, I think that at this point, the Bengals need to be highlighted as a absolute green flag for fantasy. When you get passed on by 50-year-old Russell Wilson for 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, and you make him look like prime Russ, I'm going to start everyone against you, especially in the passing game that I possibly can. That includes Cooper Rush. He's a very intriguing super flex option for me this week. I know like I don't know, if you're in a super flex league and you have CJ Stroud on bye, I love the Cooper Rush spot here. I think 20-point game is 100% in the cards with this Bengals team that we know will score against this Cowboys defense, right? So Rico Dowdle, we're also going to start him. He's finally become the completely featured back on this team, and I think that this Cowboys team without Dak in there has kind of been forced to commit a little bit more to the run. As it turns out, Rico Dowdle is a pretty solid player. The Cowboys have had some good returns from committing to the run. I think they're going to continue to do that. I've mentioned it a couple times. This Bengals defense has done a good job of bottling up the run to a certain extent, but I wouldn't be shocked to see 20 or more touches for Rico Dowdle here. CD, obviously, his ceiling is not where it is if Dak is his quarterback, but I think that he is easily a high end wide receiver two here, potentially touching wide receiver one in this super positive matchup. Bengals secondary is Swiss cheese. They suck. They're ass. Start your CD shares here. And then Jake Ferguson, same deal. I think that he is like kind of in that Will Disley level of tight end at this point in time with Cooper Rush and like the new standard that is the Cowboys offense, but this is about as positive as a matchup as it gets. I think the Cowboys are going to be forced to try and keep up with the Bengals scoring. So we like him here as like a mid to low end tight end one. Then for the Bengals, this is just so easy, right? It's a relatively concentrated offense depending on a couple things. You're always starting Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and Chase Brown no matter what. As long as they're in the lineup, they're just locked and loaded. I think Chase Brown at this point is like I think he's at the ECR number 5 running back. I'm really bullish on him because he's getting all the touches, right? I'm a big what is your touch share? How many opportunities are you getting per game type of dude. Chase Brown is like just completely dominating the Bengals backfield. So we're gonna play him here. I have him as RB1 this week. Joe Burrow, he's continued to play at an MVP level. It's just the entire Bengals team is letting him down. And then Jamar Chase, fantasy wide receiver one this year. He's already. I've been seeing mock drafts go around. He's been kind of going as the consensus number one player next year. I like the idea. I think I would be down on that. He's probably going to be the highest paid wide receiver in the NFL during this offseason based on what his performance on the field is. And the only other wild card really is T. Higgins. Listen, I sold this player short, I think, a little bit in terms of what his talent is. Dude's a baller. He just has to battle injury, right? The reason we have Mike Gesicki and Andre Yoshivas on here, even on the slide, is fantasy relevant, is I think those two guys pop up if T. Higgins does not play. If T. Higgins plays, those two, Gesicki and Yoshivas, become just totally irrelevant and never start them or even attempt to start them because T. Higgins will get that workload. But if T. Higgins doesn't play, then you can kind of think about them as tricky decision. T. Higgins should go here. I have him as a low end one this week, honestly. Love the matchup here, love the opportunity. Anything I missed, Yanni?
Nah, man, you nailed it.
I'm stoked for this one's going to be a Simpsons simulcast on Monday night. I don't know exactly what that means. I saw the commercial with Homer Simpson though for this game.
I don't care what it means. I'm not watching it. I don't get that. You don't need to make the game better. The product's perfect. It's perfect. Just give me the commentators. Give me the fucking football. Come on.
You didn't
Yeah,
watch
dude.
the Nickelodeon game last year when they were in London and they
No,
did like the Falcons and Jaguars Nickelodeon game?
no, but that is like getting the younger generation involved, and that's like trying to appeal to kids. I actually think that's great when they do that stuff, or like the Spanish simulcast. Totally get. I love, dude. The have you heard either the Korean or the Spanish calls on some of these football games? They're incredible. Like when because they have amazing commentators. Like I love that stuff. That Simpsons simulcast. Who is that appealing? Like potheads or something? I don't understand who that appeals to, the Simpsons simulcast, but whatever. I've never watched a Manning cast in my life, dude. Never. Never. I am a traditional, I reject modernity, embrace tradition. I have never watched a Manning cast in my life. I don't know. What are you excited for? Are you going to catch it?
I don't know, man. If I can skip out on Chris Collinsworth and maybe listen to Barney, the local drunk, announce a couple plays, I might do it. I like The Simpsons though. I grew up watching that show. But at any rate, I believe that's going to do it for us. This is Monday night, so if you made it through the whole video, thank you. Please like, subscribe, hit the bell. It really helps the channel out. Question of the day for the audience. What was
I've
your
got one.
favorite? Oh, okay, go for it.
Were you going to ask what your favorite animated show was?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was mine too. Were you a South Park, a Family Guy, a Simpsons, or I believe those were the big three, right?
yeah,
Which
yeah.
of those three were your thing?
Yeah. And we will catch you guys on Friday for the gambling show.